Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
I heard that Trump was sending out some troops, and I came to respect that, and hopefully it goes good. Hopefully it goes good. I'm excited.
This is a line that if we cross this as a nation, will not be easily come back. If we make military troops on civilian cities the norm, it's going to stay that way.
Trump continues addressing one of his top re-election campaign issues, that not only the war on crime, but also an effort to continue deporting individuals who are in the United States illegally and who are suspected of committing various levels of crime. This is your On the Record national podcast for Wednesday, October 8th. I'm Tim Darnell, joined as always by my friend and colleague and the host of every Sunday morning's On the Record with Atlanta News First broadcast, Rick Bolbaum. Rick, before we get into this issue of National Guard troops being deployed in various American cities, I want to bring everyone up to date with this package from a national correspondent, Ivan Rodriguez, on the current controversy facing and the current battles that President Trump and his opponents are waging against each other as he attempts to deploy National Guard troops on the streets of several American cities. Here's that report.
Tensions are high in two Democrat-led cities as the Trump administration continues to step up its immigration enforcement efforts. Over the weekend, protests sparked in Chicago after President Donald Trump authorized 300 members of the Illinois National Guard to, quote, protect federal officers and assets. This comes over the objections of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
If they're not going to focus on the worst of the worst, which is what the president said they were going to do, they need to get the heck out. What they ought to do is allow us to work with FBI, ATF, DEA, who are civilian law enforcement and understand how to target and take out the bad guys.
In Oregon Sunday, a Trump-appointed federal judge expanded on a more narrow ruling that prevented the Trump administration from sending Oregon National Guard troops to the state's largest city. This came after officials in Oregon and California objected in court to Trump reassigning federalized Guard troops in Los Angeles to Portland.
All you have to do is look at the television, turn on your television, read your newspapers. It's burning to the ground. The governor, the mayor, the politicians are petrified for their lives. And you have a judge like that, that judge ought to be ashamed of himself.
The temporary restraining order now blocks National Guard troops from anywhere in the country to Portland.
There's no need for military intervention in Oregon. There's no insurrection in Portland. There's no threat to national security. Oregon is our home. It is not a military target.
The Trump administration plans to appeal the judge's decision. I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
Rick, we heard in that report from national correspondent Ivan Rodriguez, soundbite from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker overnight. He is calling the latest developments when Texas National Guard troops arriving in Chicago overnight. He is now calling that an authoritarian march at the behest of President Donald Trump. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson also reacting with quite a lot of outrage. This is an issue that the president has, as I said earlier, made a central part of his re-election campaign, and now he is kind of expanding that reach to deploy to any city such as Washington, D.C., perhaps the city of Memphis, others where he sees a rise in violent crime.
That's right. And to his supporters, President Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do when he ran for this second term. He's following through on campaign promises to enforce immigration laws in this country and to find those who have come here illegally and have broken the law in other ways and getting them out of the country. To his detractors, of course, this is a heavy-handed, unnecessary use of federal troops that oversteps what has traditionally been, really a boundary here in the U.S., which is is that the U.S. military is not to be used except under very, very extreme circumstances, not to be used as a domestic police force. And so that's what we're hearing in these cases that are being brought to various jurisdictions and judges around the country, some of whom have ruled against the Trump administration in recent days. But we just heard, as we were getting ready to come on the air this morning, Tim, that President Trump is suggesting now that Governor Pritzker of Illinois should be put in jail for failing to protect ICE agents who are on the ground in the state of Illinois. And so you really see a sort of a ratcheting up of the rhetoric on both sides as we watch all of this play out. We've heard President Trump refer to cities like Portland as a war zone. The numbers don't bear that out. If you take a look at crime figures, I mean, yes, of course, there's crime in the city of Portland, but it doesn't seem to be on the level that would necessitate the use of federal troops and National Guard troops being deployed there. But again, this is all playing out in the courts, and like every other controversial decision that the Trump administration has made, it does seem as though this one as well is heading eventually to the U.S. Supreme Court.
There are a lot of legal battles that are looming ahead as President Trump continues deploying National Guard troops to cities like Portland and Chicago, perhaps Memphis, perhaps already in Washington, D.C. He has already lost a court battle in his efforts to deploy National Guard troops in the city of Los Angeles, a victory of a decision that California Governor Gavin Newsom, possibly a presidential contender in 2028, is calling a victory for Donald Trump's opponents. We're also looking at perhaps the invocation of the Insurrection Act, which does allow a president to dispatch active military duty personnel in locations and states that are deemed unable to put down an insurrection or who are defying federal law. That's another legal battle that I think we're going to see more skirmishes and more fights erupt over.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that this is going to continue as we see more states where President Trump decides he wants to send these National Guard troops, where he sends these troops. I think we're going to see other governors follow this sort of template that has been established by Governor Newsom in California and other Democratic governors around the country to try to challenge this in courts. And yes, the Insurrection Act, as you said, is really meant to quell insurrections. That's exactly what it's called, and violence on the streets that cannot be controlled by the domestic and local law enforcement officials. But we've heard from a judge in a recent ruling that these claims of cities describing them as war zones are untethered to reality, according to one of the judges that has made a ruling in this case. And we should say that some of these judges are judges that were appointed by Republican presidents. And so we're not just talking about, judges that were put on the bench by Democrats, but rather by Republicans as well. So there is some concern on both sides of the aisle as President Trump carries out and carries through on these promises that he made and these policies that he wants to put in place.
You mentioned the really heightened state of political rhetoric. We saw one of the most contentious Senate testimonies yesterday when Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared before the Senate Oversight Committee, where she got into a very heated exchange with Illinois Senator Dick Durbin. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, really criticizing the senator's priorities and basically saying if you love the city of Chicago as much as you despise or hate President Donald Trump, perhaps the administration wouldn't feel the necessity to move federal troops or National Guard troops into the city of Chicago. How is this going to continue to play out? Do you think we're going to see more overheated political rhetoric on both sides? The government shutdown, we should mention, today is officially 1 week old, today being Wednesday, October 8th. The government shutdown at the time when you and I last recorded an On the Record podcast on Wednesday, October 1st. We're now seeing 7 days into the government shutdown. Attorney General Pam Bondi saying that she has a number of DOJ lawyers who are not being paid because because of the funding to partial government shutdown. How is this all going to play out over the next week or so?
Well, when we talked about this last week, Tim, I mentioned the fact that, in years past, when there have been skirmishes over government funding and gaps the way that we're seeing now with this shutdown, that it was centrists in both the Republican and Democratic Party who were able to come together and forge an agreement that their respective parties would then be able to go along with. And what we said last week is that there are very few of those people in Congress anymore, with really most members of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, really sort of on the outward edges of the ideological spectrum here. But we are beginning to see, and maybe this is the way forward, a few cracks. There are some Republicans who are talking now about a willingness to negotiate on these Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year, that are at the heart of this government shutdown. Democrats insisting that those subsidies be extended before they're willing to sign on to any kind of a continuing resolution to fund the government and get it back up and running. And so maybe there is a way here to strike a deal over that. The Republicans have said, the Republican leadership has said, look, we're more than happy to talk about these Obamacare subsidies, but first you've got to reopen the government. First, you have to vote on this continuing resolution to fund the government for another few weeks to give us more time to negotiate, and then we will negotiate with you. But Democrats are saying, we need more than that. We need more than just your word that you're going to be willing to sit down and talk to us after we sign on to anything. So that's the sort of stalemate. But now we're seeing Senator Susan Collins of Maine. She is a moderate Republican. And also Senator Angus King, also of Maine, who is technically an independent, but who caucuses with the Democrats. He had voted in favor of the continuing resolution. He was one of only a few Democrats to side with the Republicans and vote to pass this continuing resolution, this short-term spending bill. But now even he is saying that he is rethinking his support for that he would like to hear more of a commitment when it comes to these Obamacare subsidies. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of our own members of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, a Republican from Rome here in the northwestern corner of our state here in Georgia, who, of course, is really someone that you do not typically think of as siding with Democrats, although in this particular case, while she says she hates Obamacare, she said that she does realize that it's going to boost premiums for millions of Americans who get their health insurance through the Obamacare marketplace, including her own children. And she said that's crazy. So she is now talking about the need for some kind of a deal on these Obamacare subsidies that, again, if they are allowed to expire as they are set to at the end of this year, it's going to mean a major increase in health care costs for millions of Americans, and especially here in Georgia, one of the states where Medicaid was not expanded as was in many other states around the country, and a lot of people sort of being forced onto the Obamacare marketplace. Those are the very people that would be impacted if those subsidies are allowed to expire.
The other really impact that is only now beginning to be felt in terms of the government shutdown is the issue of air travel and air traffic controllers. There was a shortage of air traffic controllers in New Jersey overnight. We were talking in our meeting yesterday, our planning meeting for On the Record, with Atlanta News First, where looking back at the last government shutdown that happened under President Trump's first administration, the longest in history, 35 days, it was really the impact on air travel that really necessitated both sides coming to the table and putting their differences aside and reopening the government.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, that is a reminder sort of what's at play here. These politicians, as much as they, stand firm by their positions, they are very closely monitoring public opinion polls. And neither party wants to be seen as being at fault and being to blame for this government shutdown, especially as more and more Americans become inconvenienced by the government shutdown. And air traffic controllers and TSA workers, those are federal workers who are working without pay right now. And so you're right. When this happened back in January 2018, 2019, in the first Trump administration, that was the reason. The fact that there were so many of these federal workers at airports around the country that were calling out sick, sort of in a coordinated way, unofficially, but doing so behind the scenes, planning these in order to cause an impact on the American traveling public. And that was something that politicians just decided that they didn't really want any part of. And so that brought them back to the table. We're beginning to see that now. And we're seeing that a number of flights have been canceled, that the FAA is lowering the number of flights that are being allowed to take off, to fly in the skies now because of the staffing issues at the TSA and at the air traffic controller towers. And so as people's flights get canceled, or delayed because of all of this, that's going to get people pretty upset. And who do they blame for this? Well, that's what everybody wants to know. And it's likely that whoever it seems is getting the blame, that's going to be the side that's going to say, all right, let's sit down and hammer out a deal.
Well, we encourage all of you to continue watching and listening to Atlanta News First on our website, atlantanewsfirst.com, where we'll continue to bring you the latest, not only in terms of President Donald Trump's efforts to deploy National Guard troops to American cities. Obviously, today is day 7 of the government shutdown. Another issue we're watching for later today, former FBI Director James Comey is expected to be arraigned today, Wednesday, October 7th, or October 8th, I should say, on charges that he has lied to Congress. Also, a reminder to watch every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Atlanta News First, for we showcase On the Record with Atlanta News First, hosted by my friend and colleague here, Rick Volbaum, and political reporter Doug Reardon. A reminder also, you can watch and listen to On the Record with Atlanta News First, as well as all of our podcasts on YouTube, and listen wherever you get your podcast, and download your favorite podcast on your preferred podcasting platform.
Now,
thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.